Hey, it's New Thought Talk. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center, located in beautiful Fresno, California, the heart of the Central Valley of California, and the Central Valley is the heart of California itself. So as I say each week, we got a lot of heart going on today, and I hope today is a great day for you. I hope you declared today a great day when you got started before you opened your eyes this morning, and I hope that today is unfolded in the way that you have intended and that the divine has demonstrated God's goodness in your life today. So, last week I started off talking about, I'd read an article on, there were some people that had some issues with prosperity gospel, and I want to revisit that today a little bit. And I also was working on something out of the home study course, but I found it in Living the Science of Mind. So it's on page 31 and 32, and it was, on 33, and it's called What is Spirituality? And I kind of covered the first half of this last week. We're going to pick it up today, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, this thing called the prosperity gospel, and then we're going to get started on something that may run for a couple of weeks. We'll see how it unfolds. But anyway, what is spirituality? Last week we read that we hear a great deal about certain people being spiritual, and there's nothing wrong with this, provided it does not become maudlin or maudlin attitude. We talked about it not being just an attitude, but a mind state, if you will. And I don't remember if I used that word specifically, but spirituality really is a mind state. It's having that state of mind at all times, that all that we experience, all of it, what we consider good, bad, or indifferent, all that we experience is still the divine principle expressing in our life. And our experience of that is based to a very great extent on what we personally believe. You know, when Jesus said it's done unto us as we believe, oftentimes people tend to think that what that was talking about is just like when we're praying or various things like that. But in truth, it's done unto us as we believe is really a definition of how we experience our life in its totality. Because it's not the physical activity that happens that determines our relationship with what happens and thus our reality in that moment. It's our beliefs about what happened. You know, as I said last week, people can experience the very same event and come away with diametrically opposed opinions on the goodness or not goodness or enjoyableness or unenjoyableness of that particular event. And that is their reality. It's not just how they experienced it, but it is their reality. Their reality is happy or up, or maybe it's sad or depressed or anything in between. And as we go through life, we don't think about it, but that's the way we experience our entire life while we're awake. And while we're sleeping, we experience it through our dream state, oftentimes through dreams that may leave us happy, or sometimes, if we have nightmares, maybe not so happy. But still, that's our mind talking to us, and it's our belief systems working their way out. What is spirituality? Spirituality is an embodiment of an understanding. This is my definition, but an embodiment of an understanding that the totality of all that is an expression of divine principle, or God, or goddess, if you'd like to call it or her that, you know, however you want to understand that. And for people that happen to maybe not necessarily be what we can call God believers, but maybe they believe in something, and if that's you, then I'm talking to you right now. If you allow for the fact that maybe something, and maybe that something is, maybe it isn't, but your relationship to that and how you understand that plays out greatly in how you experience the moment-to-moment, day-to-day life. How we believe, what we believe is done unto us. If we happen to be someone that has an optimistic, foundation in our inner beingness, then, life is kind of an ongoing celebration of things to celebrate. But if you're like most of us that grew up in a very mixed environment, oftentimes subject to all sorts of stuff going on, it might be a mixed bag. That would be really tough if we couldn't do anything about it. That's the beauty of New Thought for me. That's the beauty of Science of Mind and Spirit. That's what I embraced when I first came to it. It's what I believe today, and it's what I share. And what I hope to relay to you an understanding of. I'm not asking you to believe as I believe, but consider the things that I'm talking about, and maybe some of them will fit your life experience. So what is spirituality? It's how we relate to that divine principle, to God. If we believe that God is somewhere out there and we're here, then God is separate from us. There cannot be a oneness if God's out there. If God is everything, then the next logical step is that God expresses as us in that everythingness. As consciousness, we become kind of a centralized focus of consciousness that expresses as the individual that we are. When we address our spiritual nature in that way, we come with a lot of options, if you will. The late Louise Hay used to say, change your thinking, change your life. Now, that wasn't original to her. Ernest Holmes used to say it, but I think Louise probably made it most popular. I know that the late Wayne Dyer used it, and many other people that aren't so late are still using it. Change your thinking, change your life. It's very simplistic. And in truth, it really takes a little bit more than just changing your thinking. What you're doing is you're changing your belief systems. In changing your belief systems, you do that through changing how you think, being aware of what you think, and rejecting things that are limiting from that library that you have in mind that defines your life experience. Ernest Holmes goes on to say, we're talking about what is spirituality. He says, spirituality cannot be taught, but it can be felt, it can be practiced, it can be embodied. And I like the idea, the understanding that spirituality can be practiced. And over a period of time, we're going to get back to that a little bit more. He says each in his or her own consciousness must experience it in his or her own way. And this way will always be what's best for them. Indeed, it will be the only way that they could do it, because in the secret precinct of the mind, which is alone with God, nothing else can enter. We talk about going within, and yeah, I've seen a lot of people have a lot of fun with this idea of going within. The late David Walker used to talk about it. Have you ever seen somebody try to go within? And he had a whole presentation that he did. But we understand when we talk about this concept of going within, what it really means. It means basically quieting our mind, closing down the external stimulus that would, be in the way of noise or lights or whatever, breathing deeply, slowly, and allowing our consciousness to reflect in an inward way. Now, one of the great ways of doing this is what they call a mindfulness meditation. And I'm not here to teach meditations today, but if you're familiar with it, it's a very powerful tool. Focusing just on your breathing or a single thing, and as your concentration spreads, gets distracted, you just slowly bring it back. If you do nothing more than that, and you do it consistently on a daily basis, forget the spirituality aspect for a minute, and we'll take a look at what neuroscience says about it. What neuroscience says about doing just that simple procedure is that you are actually in the process of rewiring your brain in a good way. We used to think that our brain was wired up pretty much in its total by the time that we hit about 20 years old, and we had maximum connections, we had maximum neurons, we had maximum just about everything, and life from that point was kind of a downhill slide from that maximum level to wherever we ended up. Depending on how much we abused our body and our minds and our brains, the theory was anyway, it could be very limiting. With the advent of the functional MRI and the ability for neuroscience to actually watch the brain in its real-time function, we begin to realize that a whole lot more of the brain is involved a whole lot more of the time. We used to think that we used about 10 to 20% of our brain, depending on who you listen to, and we had all this 80% excess. Now we know that pretty much we use it all. And we use it in various ways. But we also learned that one, we can create new cells. Two, our cells can create new connections. And three, the functioning areas of our brain can actually change how they function, take up other functions if the need arises. This is all exciting stuff in neuroscience, but from a spiritual level, particularly when we look at it from a New Thought spiritual level, we have taught these concepts, if you will, from what we call an anecdotal position, which means we didn't have hard research to back up what we were saying, but what we did have was observation that if you were to do this, that you could expect these kinds of results. Science has now begun to give us the actual science behind why doing this gives you this result. But the end result is, no pun intended, the results are positive for us as individuals. If we're struggling in life and we decide that we don't want to struggle anymore, and the decision has to be something that we come to. It just, for most people, it doesn't just happen. If we decide we want to change, and we decide that in our desire to change that we are going to make a conscious effort to do so, and then we consistently follow up on it, we will change our life. But it starts with a decision. It starts with changing our thoughts. We change our beliefs. Beliefs that we know that we hold and beliefs that we aren't aware that we hold, but they're still there, and they operate within our mind on an unconscious level, but they still function there. And we've talked about those. But in our spiritual journey, we've decided that there's more to life than what our five senses can tell us. We want to seek spirituality. We maybe have had a theological, a dogmatic, spiritual past, but we're looking for something different because it doesn't make sense with what we're seeing in life today for us. And I'm not casting judgment on anybody's personal beliefs because they're all very important to whoever we are, wherever we're at that time. And I encourage you to follow whatever spiritual path you are currently following. But if you're searching, okay, if you're looking for something, then you begin your spiritual journey. And in doing the spiritual journey process, having some understanding of what spirituality is kind of helps focus us and sets the direction out. So we're going to take our first break, and we're going to pick up there. I'll kind of pick up from where I was last week, and we'll move forward in today's talk. I'll see you when we come back.
Linda Lee Kane is an author of fantasies, thrillers, contemporary fiction, and children's books. Order a book by Linda Lee Kane on Amazon or on lindaleekane.com. Call Paul Bonander of Bonander Real Estate to buy this beautiful 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom home at 3486 Mecca Avenue in Clovis. Call 559-246-6731 for all your real estate needs. The Saga of Bridget and Amanda by Carol Love Forbes brings to life the struggles of historical women in early America. Find The Saga of Bridget and Amanda on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and order your copy today.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Moving right along, it is New Thought Talk. I am your host, the Reverend Steve Walling, and we're talking about what is spirituality and things beyond that. So, continuing on, Holmes says, listening daily to that which can only be felt, daily sensing and communing with that which is too intangible to be put into words, one finds an essence flowing through one's thought, which can be neither analyzed nor described. In other words, as we begin this journey, we can talk about the journey, But for each of us, that journey is extremely personal, intimate, within ourselves. It's as we begin to move forward and we begin to see things demonstrated in our life that are a direct result of the time we've taken to quiet our mind and to commune with Spirit, and we realize the connection. It becomes it's not only encouraging, but it's empowering. There is a prayer that it's called the Prayer of Protection, and it came out of the Unity organization. And it goes, and I used it to close the show with many times, that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, and the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is there, and all is well. It's a lot of God going on in that prayer, but the bottom line is in the last part of that prayer. Wherever we are, God is there. And God, as the creative source and force behind all that is, being as Jesus has referred to as our Father or Mother, whatever you want to call it, the provider. And we have so many lessons that life has given us, spiritual teachers have shared with us about the ability of the divine to provide for us. So the early pioneers in New Thought, in religious science, Dr. Ernest Holmes, his brother Fenwick, as they begin to see how there is a responsive nature to the divine principle when we go to it in a particular way, not asking, hoping, and begging for something, but realizing that if God is good and God is good, if God is all there is and God is all there is, then there is a response, a positive response to that desire which we seek, whether it be in healing a condition or healing a disease or healing something in our life that we're facing. As we begin to do this and we see things unfold, we realize the spiritual nature of which we are a particular part of. Moving on, Holmes says, do not wonder whether or not you are spiritual. Rather, accept the fact that you must be. In a sense, you had nothing to do with it. This is your nature. You are rooted in a supreme mind, in the everlasting Spirit, in the perfect presence. Spirituality is the consciousness that comes through communing with God. For treatment is a definite act, and however spiritual must still take a definite form. Let me reread that because I got it messed up. Spirituality is the consciousness that comes through communing with God. For treatment is a definite act, and however spiritual must still take a definite form. Treatment, as we're talking about it, spiritual mind treatment, spiritual mind healing, is that process, is that method, if you will, that we formalize within our mind, our consciousness, to remove that which distracts us from all that's going on, to recognize the truth, the power, the presence of God, and then to see and create the image, expectation, the mental equivalent, if you will, of what it is that we're treating for, with the understanding that, the desire is to be expected to be present in our life at the level of our belief and many of the other things we've talked about. Which brings me kind of back to this idea of the prosperity gospel. There are a lot of people within and outside of New Thought that the idea of the prosperity gospel kind of tends to rankle because it just doesn't, it feels like maybe greediness or getting for myselfness or selfishness or things that are not spiritual in nature, if you will. And I'm sure that there are some people that apply the concept of creating prosperity in their life from a very solely singular point of view, and that is their own. And I'm not saying that it won't work, but the law that we're using is not the law of attraction like most people seem to think. It's the law of cause and effect. The law of attraction is a part of the law of cause and effect, but the law of cause and effect covers so much more in our consciousness, in the way we interact in life. And oftentimes people that tend to take a taking consciousness, if you will, apply it through the law of attraction, and they seemingly get what it is that they have wanted to bring into their life. We don't oftentimes see the rest of the conditions, the effects that come with that. There are a lot of unhappy, wealthy people that have miserable lives. There's a lot of people that we might say are less than wealthy that live very abundant lives. Which brings me back to this word prosperity. If we see the word prosperity solely as something of a physical nature, then we can see where problems may arise. But let's reevaluate prosperity for this conversation. Let's evaluate prosperity or realize prosperity as being having wholeness in your life, having health in your life, having good relationships, having peace and harmony. As we describe those things, in a sense, we're also describing a level, sometimes a very deep level, of spirituality. People that recognize their relationship and the nature of the divine principle, their relationship to it, and realize that they can apply within themselves the power of the law of cause and effect, can experience and do experience oftentimes very prosperous lives. They may not be the life that you and I would consider prosperous, but it's not for us to judge how people define that for themselves. Happiness is one of the things that we can look at as we talk about prosperity. And happiness, it's really an interesting thing. I've seen, my opinion anyway, that there's two ways to look at happiness. There are people that look at happiness as something that is provided for us by outside individuals, events, conditions, and things, or happiness that is something that's in the core of our being. It's part of that inner spiritualness that we can call the God within or the Christ within. I happen to believe the latter part to be the latter way of looking at it, to be the real basis for happiness, because I have been and have experienced situations that are pretty dire, and yet people have found in those moments happiness at some level. If you don't believe that it's there, it won't be there. Of course, you got to understand it's done unto you as you believe. So, as people begin to seek their spiritual path, we talk about spirituality being something that is personal and intimate to each and every one of us. That experience that we can only know but really can't share. We can talk about, but we can't give. It's in that place, in that space where happiness resides. But it's also in that place, in that space where love resides. The appreciation for beauty, where harmony as in a way of beingness lives, where true peace finds itself in our soul, if you will. That can't be provided from the outside. No matter what the outside brings to us in the way of things that, and again, I'm sharing my personal opinion, but what the outside brings to us, no matter how wonderful it is, it can be lost at some point in time. Whether we lose it through transitioning from this life to the next, or we lose it because environmental conditions change, or life changes, or my experience changes, what I'm available to do through age or whatever changes. Does my happiness go with the loss of the things that I have? There are people that believe that. I think that's kind of a tough way to live your life. But there's a lot of people that do. However, when we begin to make that shift and we begin to seek a spiritual path, we have to address a lot of the beliefs that we hold. And a lot of those beliefs we picked up along the way as we gotten to the age that we're at, wherever we're at. The wonderful thing is, no matter where we're at, we start right there and we can create change. Again, it comes with a decision to seek something other than life dependent upon all that my five senses can provide for me. And once I get beyond the five senses, get beyond the physical, then we transition into what is often called the metaphysical. And in the metaphysical realm, there's a lot of different things, a lot of different paths. And wherever you're at, if you happen to be in that space, I'm sure it's perfect for you at that point in time. But you have to be there by choice. In the Science of Mind, at the beginning of the general summary, the mind of man is some part of the mind of God. Therefore, it contains within itself unlimited possibility of expansion and self-expression. The mind of man is some part of the mind of God, and therefore it contains within itself unlimited possibility of expansion and self-expression. That starts with the belief that God is infinite. That starts with the belief that if God is infinite, that God expresses as me, expressing through me in this moment. If God is expressing as me, through me, then the mind that I have is really the mind within God. And that's one of the first things that we come to in our spiritual journey through the New Thought process. We move into that. We're going to take our next break, and we're going to pick it up from that point, and we'll move forward. And I'll see you when we come back.
Prepare to be amazed by the magic of Elder. Kyle Elder is a fantastic entertainer who has been studying magic for over 20 years. Book Kyle and the Magic of Elder for your event, large or small. Kyle will make you laugh and mesmerize you with his magic. For more information or a free quote, visit magicofelder.com or call 559-917-4543. Kristen McIntosh is a real estate broker who prides herself on providing the highest level of service to her customers. Her enthusiasm for achieving desired results is an asset to her clients. Contact Kristen at 559-419-0333 and visit KristenMcIntosh.com. Voir dire, An Oath to Tell and Seek the Truth by Santiago Camarena, depicts the vicious cycle of drugs, crime, and incarceration. It argues that the media, politics, and our laws systematically contribute to this cycle. Get your copy of Voir dire at VoirDireStory.com.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I am your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from Spiritual Awareness Center located in Fresno, California. Thank you for being with me today, and we've been talking about spirituality, a little bit about the prosperity gospel, but right now we're talking about making our journey, our spiritual journey, when we've decided to do so. And I read right before the break from the beginning of the general summary in the Science of Mind, where Ernest Holmes says the mind of man is some part of the mind of God, therefore it contains within itself unlimited possibility of expansion and self-expression. Unlimited possibility that's available to each and every one of us. When we begin to get the idea of what that truly means, we can really begin to see how creating happiness, if you will, or peace or harmony or the love experience in our life comes from within. We have the power to do that. We have the connectedness, if you will. We have the unlimited possibility of seeing this expressed in our lives. And that's not based on anybody else or any other conditions or any particular thing. But we have to get to that mindset. We have to realize that we are there and that we can move forward from there. So we begin our journey. Well, what do we do on our journey? We've talked about this throughout the history of the show. We've talked about meditation and affirmations and various other so-called spiritual tools that we can use. As we continue to seek to grow our spiritual experience, which Holmes says is necessary for us if we are to truly understand our connectedness with the divine principle, with God. And I believe that. We can intellectualize the concept of God. We can intellectualize, all this idea of infiniteness and stuff, and not be any different than anybody else has been throughout the centuries that see God as something out there. It's not until we have the spiritual experience, if you will, and that's not something that's super mystical. It's something that is very personal, but it's something that as we as we start our journey, as we continue to move forward, we will see things unfold in our life in such a way that leaves no doubt that God as Spirit is expressing in those moments, in those times, in those places. Powerful stuff. Now, I've talked about affirmations, and I've talked about meditation. I've talked about willpower versus imagination and all sorts of things. I'm going to talk about something today as we continue on the second part of today's show. Something that I had the opportunity to read. It's a book I had an opportunity to read, and early on in my New Thought journey, and I thought it was nice, but I really didn't give it much weight at the time because it really wasn't science of mind. And for good or bad or whatever, I've always tended to be very science of mind oriented. So there you go. But, with time and age often comes wisdom, and I had the opportunity to go back and revisit this book, and I've revisited it multiple times. I don't read it necessarily directly with the understanding as the author wrote it, but I see it as a very powerful tool, particularly for those that are seeking to create a new life experience, and they don't have the tools necessarily. They don't know how to do this. And we talk about affirmations, and truth be told, affirmations can be, they're very simple, but oftentimes they can be confusing. Do I say the same one every day? Do I do different ones throughout the day? And people get confused. Are there better ones than other ones? And those are all worthy questions, but they're questions that we don't necessarily have to address at this point in time in our experience. Now, the title of the book is called The Handbook to Higher Consciousness, and it was written by a man whose name was Ken Keyes. He spells it Keyes, Keyes, Jr. He wrote it back in the 70s. His journey is a very powerful one. He was, after he got out of the Navy, I think it was about 1949, he became paralyzed from the neck down. He was in Florida, and he actually ended up creating a very successful real estate business down there. But somewhere along the way, he became spiritual or found a spiritual path. And he had questions, and questions led to other questions, and he had what he considered a very spiritual experience, wherein he was gifted with what he calls the 12 pathways, and I'm going to talk about those. But his book teaches a concept of dealing with life on an ongoing basis, raising our consciousness, if you will, from being so tied in and connected to the physical reality up through, and he has several levels of consciousness that he lays out. And if you were to do nothing else with your life, then maybe read this and put it into practice. It's a very powerful spiritual tool. I now use it in conjunction with teaching people how to incorporate various things in their journey through religious science of mind, because what Ken called the 12 pathways are probably some of the greatest affirmations and lessons that we can use in our journey to expressing ourselves in this physical plane in a very spiritual way. The first pathway, the first three pathways are entitled Freeing Myself. And the first one goes, I'm freeing myself from security, sensation, and power addictions that make me try to forcefully control situations in my life and thus destroy my serenity and keep me from loving myself and others. Now, if you take the concept that teaches, I am freeing myself from security, sensation, and power addictions. And what he's talking about, I'm not going to go through the whole process, but what he calls the emotional addictions are really the habitual interactions between what we often call our ego, our rational mind, and our physical expression that we call life, based on our beliefs that have created the reality of a less than-ness in our life experience. Imagine, if you will, if you addressed every situation in your life where you weren't tied to it for security or sensation or power reasons. What I'm saying is, what if you addressed every situation in your life from a consciousness of acceptance And in truth, I believe that that's really what is at the core of what Ken teaches. Now, the book is no longer in print. You can find used copies on Amazon and various other used book sources. If you look, I think you can find a PDF copy online that is a legal PDF copy that's not something that was stolen, if you will, or put up illegally. And it's important that we, as we do this, that we keep our integrity where we should be. I know people that oftentimes they'll find a source, and sometimes you gotta question it. But anyway, the thing is, you can find the book out there in its various forms. You can also find some of Ken's understandings behind what he taught, and I highly recommend it, even if you're a dedicated Science of Mind or a Unity person. It's a good read, but the lessons themselves, or the pathways themselves, they're so powerful in the insight that they offer, and what Ken taught at the time, and it's a good tool to use today, is that he suggests that you memorize all 12, and that as you are addressing situations in your life where things are a little out of sorts, that you, in your own mind, in your consciousness, you figure out what buttons are being pushed, what so-called addictions are being triggered. If you're dealing with someone and the situation becomes argumentative, or there's an aggressiveness, where are you at in that situation? We've talked about the two most important commandments Jesus said is to love God with all that we are and to love our neighbors as ourselves. In those commandments is the understanding that as God expressed as us, we are that love essence also. But our neighbor is that person that's standing in front of us, or maybe in some cases on the other side of that computer screen, that Facebook page or that Twitter post or whatever it is. Maybe it's the evening news. If we find within ourselves that we're triggered, that buttons are pushed, then obviously there's certain things within us, has nothing to do with the out there, but within us that are triggered. When we can get to a point of acceptance doesn't mean accepting something that you find untenable. Acceptance doesn't mean that you will accept harmful situations in your life. Acceptance means accepting the other individual as an expression of divine principle, expression of God. Now, maybe their viewpoint, their position, their belief is antithetical to where you're at, and that's okay. We don't have to be, and Holmes stresses this, we don't have to be doormats for people. We can set up boundaries, and boundaries are good and healthful. But at the same time, we don't bring hate and anger to a situation. I've talked about this in the past from other different perspectives, but it's understanding that we can be involved in something, creating change in the world by first creating that change within ourselves and then seeing it expressed, is not giving in to what's going on in the world. But it's extremely powerful. People that have done that, like Gandhi, like Thoreau, like Martin Luther King Jr., these people, they weren't just little changers in the world. They were big changers in the world. And those are the ones that we know about. There's many more that we don't know about that still did the same type of thing. Occasionally we'll find a book, or we'll, maybe even see a movie or something about an individual that brought great change into the world, not by berating or overcoming in a violent sort of way or imposing their particular beliefs on somebody else, but by being the truth that they want to see in the world. I think about that, and it's one of the things that I seek to do in my own life, and I try to share that with people, hoping that maybe they'll understand that as they seek to do that in their life, that it really does, besides becoming life-changing, it's world-changing, But it goes to some of the things we were talking about today. Happiness is not created outside of ourselves. It's got to be created within. We are all prosperous when we begin to embody the spirituality of the truth of who we are. The so-called prosperity gospel has often gotten marginalized because it's taken out into the world and it's just about think and grow rich, or law of attraction to bring whatever I want in my life, and I don't have to worry about whatever. And people get confused. Oftentimes they get lost in that, literally, and in being lost, things begin to fall apart. We can change the world by changing ourselves. What Louise Hay said, change your thinking, change your life. There's incredible truth in that. When Ernest Holmes said, change your thinking, change your life, powerful truth in that. I share these words, I share the things that I read because we are changing the world. Those of us that have made a commitment to create a better world for ourselves, within ourselves. If you want to call that prosperity gospelism, I don't care. You'll see a greater good. Ken Kai's book, Handbook to Higher Consciousness, I highly recommend. I'm not going to take the time to go through all the 12 pathways, but the last of the 12, and this is a little reminder book that I have, the last of the 12 goes, here we go. I am perceiving everyone, including myself, as an awakening being who is here to claim his or her birthright to the higher consciousness planes of unconditional love and oneness. That's an image that is so awesome when we think about applying it to the world that I can often get really excited about. So even though the book's still not in print, I wanted to take a segment today and talk about it. Encourage you to find a used copy because they're out there. Like I say, there are some PDFs online. There may be some people out there still teaching it through Ken's program, which is pretty much gone by the wayside. But it's the internet. Most anything that's out there at some point will always be out there, and you can find something. If you have questions, you can always check in with me through the email rev.steve11@live.com. Or show up on Sunday at the Spiritual Awareness Center. But if you're starting your spiritual journey, and you're looking for kind of basic tools to start with, that's a good one to start. And we're going to take our last break, and I'll see you when we come back.
This 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Clovis is now for sale. Nestled on a cul-de-sac in a planned unit development, the quiet neighborhood is near Sierra Vista Mall, grocery stores, and Clovis Unified Schools. This well-maintained home featuring an open kitchen with a breakfast bar, dining area, a family room with fireplace, ceiling fans, vaulted ceilings, and inside laundry room. The large master suite has 2 large closets, a roomy bathroom with shower, and exterior door leading to the patio. Located near the intersection of Gettysburg and Fowler Avenue, call Mike Briggs Properties at 559-486-6758 to buy this home today.
Protect yourself by letting private investigator Michael Morgan Clark get the facts you need in matters of infidelity and divorce, corporate investigations, criminal defense, workers' comp, child parental abduction, wrongfully accused. Michael Morgan Clark will investigate anyone. Call 559-785-1900 or visit clarkinvestigations.com.
I'm Greg Steen, your host for the Truth for Seniors show. Glad you're joining us today and coming to you from Central Valley Talk in the heart of Fresno. So every Wednesday at 2 you can find us, and we'll be here giving you the most up-to-date and accurate information possible, bringing you experts, as we promised, from lots of different fields related to seniors, senior needs, the caregiver needs, and everything that goes with that. So if you're looking for the right information and timely information, this is the place to be.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back to New Thought Talk. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling, located in Fresno, California, minister of the Spiritual Awareness Center, and always happy to have new people show up on Sunday. Anyway, Moving on. This is from the book The Hidden Power of the Bible by Ernest Holmes. Under the title, The Purpose of Religious Science. Religious science has been referred to as a faith, a philosophy, and a way of life. And it really, the way of life becomes very important when you understand, as we've talked about today, the idea of creating a spiritual practice as our life experience, how it is extremely personal to us, and how we see it unfold in our day-to-day life experience. I want to read to you what he says here. He says, the whole purpose of religious science is to reconcile apparent separation of the spiritual world, which must be perfect, with the material world, which appears imperfect. The spiritual world is the cause of the material. We are spiritual beings governed by mental law. Only that world can appear to us which we mentally perceive. Man's experience is the logical outcome of his inner vision. His horizon is limited to the confines of his own consciousness. Wherever his consciousness lacks a true perception, its outward expression will lack proper harmony. This is why we are taught to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Peace comes as our own thought becomes tranquil. It is never conceived through confusion, for confusion begets confusion, and is analogous to the blind leading the blind, and the result of which is both fall into the ditch. Those who take up the sword shall perish by it. We should approach confusion with peace until the mentality is brought to the point of non-recognition of confusion. It will then cease to be. This statement can be vouched for only by those who have proven it, since no one lives life by proxy, but each unto himself. Every individual must make the test in his own soul, or her own soul. And so that's, throughout Holmes's writings, you get this constant reinforcement of the understanding that oftentimes he refers to it as practice. You know, practice, 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 I've read it in some places. Well, what he's talking about in practice is actually living in a conscious awareness and being aware of living in conscious awareness as we go through our day. I've shared with you Ken Kai's book, Handbook to Higher Consciousness, and we've talked about other things. Last week, I talked about my little stack of cards I keep with me, and I utilize them. And it's a tool. It's another one of those tools. I'm going to read you a couple of things as we close out our last segment here. These are things that I read to myself during the daytime. Until we place our demand upon the universe, it is just there as a possibility or potential. The purpose of spiritual mind healing, spiritual mind treatment, is just exactly that. We place our demand upon the universe. Now, that's not a demand based out of selfishness or out of greed, but it's a demand that's placed out of an inner desire. And in that inner desire, it should be a desire that creates more good in our life and in the lives of those around us. And it's amazing how when people begin to realize that it's not a taking that makes us more prosperous or happier, but really a giving. And in that giving process, things appear in our life that enhance our life. When people begin to realize that, the personalities, the mindset, if you will, begins to shift. It doesn't matter where you are in life. If you don't feel blessed, you won't be blessed. You can be extremely wealthy or extremely unwealthy and feel blessed and know that you're blessed. Or, contrary to that, if you feel limited, your life will be limited. That is a universal truth. And when we discover these, we can put them to use. And when we put them to use, we can change our lives. Louise Hay, change your thinking, change your life. Ernest Holmes, change your thinking, change your life. When you get up in the morning, tomorrow morning, greet the day with an expectation that it is absolutely great. Because in truth, that is true. It's great for the mere fact that you're here. It's great for the mere fact that it's another day in your life experience. regardless of what's on your itinerary for the day that may be uncomfortable or what you may feel is life-limiting of some sort, if you begin to greet the day with a consciousness of greatness, things begin to move in your favor. It's working on changing your thinking. Using affirmations, we talked about that. Talked about the 12 pathways. They're great. They're great affirmations. It's a great way to bring your whole mind into alignment with the idea of accepting life as a gift that it is. Life is a gift in all of its flavors, all of its shades. Sometimes it can be a little more challenging or a lot more challenging, but nonetheless, it's still a gift. When we begin to address life as that gift, more gifts seem to amazingly, miraculously appear in our life. It's done unto us as we believe. You know, I'm kind of reviewing some of the things that we talk about. That belief is not, when we say it's done unto us as we believe, we're not talking about just in a moment when we're speaking our words, so to speak, making our prayer. When we say it's done unto us as we believe, that literally is the definition of who and what we are. One of the things that I've taught many people that have worked in their life to create change, and they're not sure exactly where they're at, where they should start. We talk about starting right where you're at, and I say, okay, sit down, take a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, and begin to list out what's going on in your life. Just make a list. Don't be judgmental. Don't try and do it in 15 minutes. It may take a couple of days. Maybe you can get it done in short order. But what's going on in your life? Now, you can put it in columns, you know, good, bad, neutral, or you can just write the list and then go back over the list and put plus, minus, or zeros to organize it into a way. But whatever that list is, however it comes out, that's basically what you believe. If you are struggling, or if you're prosperous, if you're unhappy, or if you're happy, if you believe that life does to you versus life doing for you, if you believe that you're a victim, if you believe that you're confidently winning in life, however it is, all these different things, how they play out, how you understand them, how you see them in that mirror that you are basically constructing for yourself. That will tell you what your beliefs are, how you believe. And if you're honest enough to be truthful without judgment, you may find some things in there that are surprising. Some good, some not so good. But all of them can be changed. What we believe today, we didn't believe before at some time. Everything that we believe today, we've had to learn. And in the process of learning these beliefs, we've oftentimes given up other beliefs, beliefs that we would have gone to the mat, so to speak, in our understanding that that was truth, that was reality, and there is nothing beyond that. Life is one of the words, or one of the phrases we often hear is life is what we make of it. You know, there's more truth in that than we often realize. You know, we've talked about what is spirituality these last 2 weeks, you know, affirmations and things to put into practice. I'm going to probably cover a couple of different things in the next couple of weeks. I've been thinking about maybe addressing the Declaration of Principles that Dr. Holmes delineated so many years ago. And really what the Declaration of Principles are is a list of our understandings and belief of the what is. You can find those in, or you can find them online if you Google them. You can find them in Living the Science of Mind. They're out there. A faith, a philosophy, a way of life. When you take and you understand the philosophy, you accept it in faith, and I'm not talking about blind faith, put it to the test. It's amazing. I look out in the world today and I see so many different areas where neuroscience and physics and various other, what we'd call hard sciences, are giving definition or understanding to things that New Thought teachers, pioneers, just like I said earlier in the show, they just had they had an experience of seeing that A gave B, and it was pretty consistent. And it's not hard science, but they looked at it and said, if A gives B and A gives B and A gives B, then if we do A, we've got to figure we're going to get B. And so they taught it in those terms. If you accept God as infinite power, if you accept that there's a law that responds, and you address that in that way, you're going to see a response. That's kind of the way they addressed it. Today, science talks about many different things that fall into that category. And this isn't a science show today. I'm not going to address those necessarily, but it's amazing to see how it plays out. But wherever you're at in your life today, if you're thinking about, if you feel an urge within yourself to maybe express life in a more spiritual way, or understand more about spirituality and your role in that, maybe the things we talked about today will give you some direction, give you some questions, I hope, and you'll start your journey. Wherever that journey leads, again, that's your journey. I can't tell you what is right for you, but I can tell you that as you begin to do the journey, as you begin to understand, you will, if you seek and you stay consistently in it, that you will find your understanding of what the divine principle is, what God is. And you can see it play out in your life. Keep in mind that no matter where you go, what you understand, it's personal. Try not to place your judgment on somebody else as to what they must believe, even if you've been exposed to that idea. Our interaction with the divine, being personal, cannot be something that can be put upon us. So keep that in mind. Understand that there's something that we call love that is an expression of God. And all religions talk about that. Work from a basis of love in all that you do. Seek to see love in all people. You'll find that acceptance will come much easier. Life will be much more enjoyable. And who knows, maybe you'll begin to see that happiness does come from within. And that's it for today. I'll see you next week when we come back. We'll have some more good stuff to talk about. New thoughts, science of mind, religious science, Ernest Holmes, and who knows what. And I'll see you. May the light of God surround you, the love of God enfold you, the power of God protect you, and the presence of God watch over you. Because truly, wherever you are, God is there. All is well. See you next week.
CentralValleyTalk.com